Rich man asks a homeless black woman to attend a wedding, but when they arrive, the room falls silent. Austin stared blankly at the invitation in his hand. His fingers traced the elegant, gold-embossed letters, but the message still seemed surreal. His ex-girlfriend, Laura, was getting married. And not just married. She was throwing the grandest event of the year at one of the most luxurious venues in Paris. A year ago, she had walked out of his life, tired of waiting for him to prioritize their relationship over his career. Now she was marrying a man who, by all accounts, had time for her. Austin threw the invitation on his polished glass table, sinking into the plush leather couch in his penthouse overlooking the Champs-Élysées. His heart felt heavy with a mix of regret and something much darker. He hadn't spoken to Laura since she left, and now the idea of attending her wedding, alone no less, was unbearable. The evening wore on, the glow from the Eiffel Tower flickering through his window as Austin poured himself a glass of whiskey. He thought about declining the invitation, but something in him refused to take the easy way out. He would go, but not alone. The next day, as Austin wandered the streets, aimlessly walking through the crowds, he spotted her. A woman sitting on the steps of a small cafe, her head bent low, shielding herself from the bustling world. She wore a faded coat that looked like it had weathered too many winters. Her shoes were torn, her hair wild and unkempt, but there was something about her that stopped Austin in his tracks. Her face was gentle, and though her situation was evident, she exuded a quiet strength. Something inside Austin stirred. "Hi," he said awkwardly, standing a few feet away. The woman looked up slowly, her dark eyes meeting his. "Hello," she replied softly, her voice barely audible over the noise of the street. "I'm Austin." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment, as if trying to assess whether he was friend or foe. "Celeste," she finally replied, her lips curving into a faint smile. Austin hesitated. He didn't know why he had stopped. Maybe it was the wedding. Maybe it was the ache of loneliness that had crept into his bones. Whatever the reason, he found himself sitting down beside her on the cold steps. "Mind if I ask what brought you here?" Austin asked, trying to keep his tone light. Celeste shrugged. "Life, I suppose. One bad thing after another. I ended up here." Austin nodded, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't used to having real conversations with strangers, let alone people who had fallen on such hard times. But there was something in the way she spoke, with quiet resilience, that held his attention. "Look, this is going to sound insane," Austin began, rubbing his temples as if trying to piece together his own words. "But would you come to a wedding with me?" Celeste blinked, her expression caught between confusion and suspicion. "You're serious?" "I'll make sure you have something to wear, something nice. It's my ex's wedding and, honestly, I don't want to go alone." For a moment, Celeste said nothing. She stared at him, searching his face for any signs of mockery. When she found none, she let out a soft laugh. "I can't tell if this is the strangest thing that's happened to me or the kindest." "It might be both," Austin said with a small smile. "But I mean it. Come with me." Celeste's hesitation lingered a little longer, but then she nodded. "All right. Why not?" The next day, Austin took her to a boutique, one of those high-end places where the sales staff judged you based on how you looked the moment you stepped through the door. Celeste, dressed in her worn clothes, immediately drew their disdainful glances. Austin noticed it, and for a moment, he regretted bringing her here. But then, he caught Celeste's eyes. She wasn't cowering or embarrassed. She walked in with her head high, unbothered by the sideways glances. There was something regal about her, something unshakable. The staff, sensing that Austin was not a man to be trifled with, eventually warmed up, offering Celeste a selection of dresses. As she slipped behind the curtain to try them on, Austin waited, sipping a glass of water the boutique had provided as a courtesy. After what seemed like hours, Celeste emerged from the dressing room. She wore a flowing emerald gown that hugged her figure in all the right places. Her dark hair had been pulled back into an elegant style, and the makeup artist had subtly enhanced her natural beauty. She didn't just look transformed. She looked powerful. Celeste stood there, her eyes wide, as she examined herself in the mirror. "Is that really me?" she whispered. Austin smiled. "Yes, it's you." The boutique staff, now thoroughly invested in her transformation, clapped in approval. But Celeste's eyes were only on her reflection, and Austin saw for the first time a glimpse of the woman she had been before life knocked her down. "Thank you," she said softly, turning to Austin. There was a sincerity in her voice that made his heart swell. "You deserve this," he replied. The day of the wedding arrived, and as Austin pulled up to the grand venue with Celeste by his side, he couldn't help but feel a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety. The venue was a sprawling chateau in the French countryside, the kind of place where the elite gathered to celebrate life's grandest occasions. As they entered the grand hall, heads turned, conversations paused, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Celeste, now radiating confidence in her stunning gown, walked beside Austin with a grace that belied her circumstances. At the far end of the room, Austin spotted Laura. She stood with her new husband, greeting guests with a wide, polished smile. But when her eyes landed on Austin and Celeste, her expression faltered. There was a flicker of surprise, followed by something much darker, something that looked like regret. "Austin," Laura greeted him when they finally approached, her voice cool and measured. Her eyes flicked to Celeste. "And this is?" "Celeste," Austin introduced her with a smile. "My date." Laura's smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she extended her hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Celeste. You look lovely." "Thank you," Celeste replied, her voice steady and warm. "It's a beautiful wedding." The tension between them was palpable, and as they made their way through the room, Austin could feel the weight of the stares. Some guests whispered behind their hands, casting curious glances at Celeste. But she didn't flinch. She held her head high, her shoulders back, as if she belonged there more than anyone. As the night wore on, Austin found himself talking to Celeste more than anyone else. They laughed, shared stories, and he realized just how much he had underestimated her. She wasn't just someone he had brought along to make a statement. She was someone who had survived things most people couldn't even imagine. And yet, she was kind, strong, and unflinchingly honest. At one point, Laura found him near the garden, away from the crowd. "Austin, can we talk?" He nodded, following her to a quiet corner. "I didn't expect you to bring someone like her," Laura began, her voice low. "I mean, you know how these people can be." Austin frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "She's not from our world," Laura said carefully. "I just don't want you to get hurt, that's all." Austin felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. "Hurt? You're worried about me? This has nothing to do with me, Laura. It's about your embarrassment." Laura's eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't deny it. Before either of them could continue, Celeste appeared, her face calm, but her eyes sharp. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I didn't mean to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing." Laura stiffened. "I know I'm not what you expected," Celeste continued, her voice unwavering. "But Austin invited me because he sees me for who I am, and I'm more than my circumstances." For a moment, there was silence. Then, something shifted in the air. Laura, for all her composure, was at a loss for words. She muttered something about needing to greet more guests and quickly excused herself. Austin turned to Celeste, admiration flooding his chest. "You didn't have to do that." Celeste smiled, a real smile this time. "I did. Not just for you, but for me." As the night progressed, Austin and Celeste found themselves on the dance floor. The orchestra played a slow, melodic tune, and as they moved together, Austin felt something new take hold of him. This wasn't just about making Laura jealous anymore. It wasn't even about the wedding. It was about Celeste. He realized, as they swayed to the music, that he cared about her. She had walked into his life unexpectedly, but now he couldn't imagine her not being a part of it. When the music ended, Austin looked into her eyes. "Celeste, I don't want tonight to be the end." Celeste searched his face, her expression softening. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I want to help you. I want to support you. And I want to see where this goes." For a moment, Celeste didn't respond. Then, a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "I'd like that." They left the wedding together, slipping away into the cool night. The noise of the party faded behind them, replaced by the quiet of the evening. As they walked hand in hand down the cobblestone streets, Austin felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He didn't care about what anyone thought anymore. All that mattered was this moment with Celeste. And as they walked into the future together, Austin knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The cold morning light poured through Austin's apartment window, illuminating the sleek, modern furniture that decorated his home. Everything here was a testament to his success. The glass surfaces, the polished steel, the minimalist art on the walls. Yet, it all felt a little hollow today. He stood at the kitchen counter, quietly brewing coffee, his mind on the events of the night before. The wedding. The glances. Celeste standing by his side, strong and unbothered, even when they faced the judgment of his old world. He had taken her away from it all, back here to his place, where they'd spent hours talking, sharing stories until sleep overtook them. Now, the apartment was quiet. Celeste was still asleep in the guest room. Austin glanced over his shoulder at the closed door, feeling a pang of uncertainty. Would she stay? Or would she leave this morning, slipping back into the world she came from? He sipped his coffee, lost in thought, when he heard the soft click of a door opening. He turned, and there she was, Celeste, standing in the doorway of the guest room. She had changed into a pair of his sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her hair still a little messy from sleep. Yet she looked more comfortable than she had at the wedding, more herself. "Morning," she said, her voice husky with sleep. "Morning," Austin replied, smiling as he set his cup down. "Coffee?" Celeste nodded, walking slowly toward the kitchen island where he was standing. She was quiet, but not in a bad way. There was no tension in her movements, no hesitation. She seemed at ease, and Austin felt his own shoulders relax just watching her. He poured her a cup, and she accepted it gratefully. As she took a sip, their eyes met briefly. Austin felt the weight of everything that had happened between them in the last few days, things he hadn't expected, things that had taken him by surprise. He had known he was drawn to her from the start, but now it felt like something more. It was no longer about Laura. It wasn't about appearances. It was about Celeste, and the way she moved through the world with quiet strength and resilience. "I should probably get going," Celeste said, breaking the silence. Austin blinked, his heart sinking slightly. "You don't have to. I mean, if you want to stay, you're welcome to." Celeste smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I appreciate that, but I have to figure some things out." Austin nodded, even though he wanted to ask her to stay longer, to see where this connection could go. But he knew better than to push. Celeste wasn't someone who could be tied down easily. She had a life of her own, even if it wasn't one filled with luxury and ease. "I understand," he said softly. "But listen, I meant what I said last night. I want to help you. I want to be there for you." Celeste looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a small sigh, she set her coffee down and leaned against the counter. Austin, I appreciate everything you've done for me. Really, I do. But I don't want to be your project. I'm not looking for a handout or some fairy tale where a rich guy rescues a poor girl from the streets. Her words stung, but Austin knew she was right. It's not like that. I'm not trying to rescue you, Celeste. I want to get to know you better. I want to see where this goes. Celeste's eyes softened slightly. And I do too. But I have to take things slow. My life, it's complicated. I've been through a lot, and I'm still figuring out how to stand on my own 2 feet. I can't rely on someone else to fix everything. Austin nodded, understanding more than he'd like to admit. He had always been the fixer, the problem solver. In his world, money and power could usually solve most problems. But Celeste's life wasn't something he could buy his way into. She needed space, time. Okay, he said. Take all the time you need. But I'm here if you want me to be. Celeste smiled, this time more genuine. Thank you. Weeks passed, and Celeste faded back into the rhythm of her life. She returned to the streets, to the people she knew, the shelters she frequented, and the tough realities she faced every day. But she wasn't the same person she had been before. The night at the wedding, the way Austin had seen her, had given her a new kind of strength. A part of her was still cautious, still unsure, but another part of her had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved more than what life had handed her. She thought about Austin often, about the quiet moments they'd shared after the wedding, about the way he'd looked at her like she mattered. It was strange, being seen like that after so long of feeling invisible. But Celeste knew better than to get lost in those thoughts. She had to focus on herself first, to rebuild her life on her own terms. And so, she threw herself into finding work, into finding a place to stay, into clawing her way out of the hole life had dug for her. And then, one day, things changed. She had been sitting at her usual spot outside the cafe when a woman approached her. At first, Celeste didn't pay much attention. She was used to people walking by, sometimes tossing a few coins her way, other times avoiding eye contact entirely. But this woman stopped in front of her, her sharp features framed by an expensive-looking coat and oversized sunglasses. "Celeste?" the woman asked, her voice cool and measured. Celeste looked up, blinking against the sunlight. "Yeah?" the woman smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm Laura. We met at the wedding." Celeste's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to ever see Laura again, and certainly not like this. "Oh, yeah, I remember," Celeste said cautiously. "What are you doing here?" Laura sat down beside her on the bench, crossing her legs elegantly. "I wanted to talk to you." Celeste felt a wave of unease roll through her. What could Laura possibly want with her? "Look," Laura began, her voice low. "I know this is going to sound strange, but I need you to stay away from Austin." Celeste blinked, her mind reeling. "What?" Laura sighed, leaning back slightly. "You don't belong in his world, Celeste. You know that. And frankly, I don't think you're good for him. You're a distraction. Austin's had a lot on his plate since the wedding, and I don't think you're helping." Celeste felt anger bubbling up in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "I'm not trying to hurt Austin. We're friends." Laura raised an eyebrow, her expression skeptical. "Friends? Come on, let's be real here. You and I both know that's not going to work. He's from a world you can't even begin to understand. And no offense, but you're not exactly his equal." Celeste clenched her fists, fighting to keep her cool. "I don't need to be his equal. Austin's his own person. If he wants to see me, that's his choice." Laura smiled, though it was a cold, calculating smile. "I'm sure it is, but I'm just trying to save you both a lot of trouble. You don't fit into his life, and he doesn't fit into yours. It's best if you walk away now before things get messy." Celeste stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. "I don't know what you're trying to do, but it's not going to work. I care about Austin. and I'm not going to walk away just because you think I'm not good enough for him." Laura's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't say anything for a moment. Then, she stood as well, adjusting her coat. "Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you." With that, Laura turned and walked away, leaving Celeste standing there, her mind racing. Later that evening, Austin sat in his office, staring at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He had been thinking about Celeste more and more, wondering how she was doing, whether she was okay. They had stayed in touch, texting occasionally, but he hadn't seen her since that morning after the wedding. He missed her, more than he wanted to admit. His phone buzzed on the desk beside him, pulling him out of his thoughts. He picked it up, surprised to see a message from Celeste. "We need to talk. Can I come over?" Austin's heart leapt into his throat. Was something wrong? He quickly typed back a response. "Of course. Come whenever." An hour later, there was a knock at the door. Austin opened it to find Celeste standing there, looking tired but determined. He stepped aside, letting her in. "Is everything okay?" he asked, closing the door behind her. Celeste didn't answer right away. She walked into the living room, pacing for a moment before turning to face him. "Laura came to see me today," she said quietly. Austin's stomach dropped. "What?" "She told me to stay away from you," Celeste continued, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "She said I'm not good enough for you, that I don't belong in your world." Austin felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. "What? That's ridiculous!" Celeste shook her head. "Austin, she's right. We're from completely different worlds, and as much as I hate to admit it, it's true. I don't belong here, in this life." Austin took a step forward, his voice firm. "No, she's not right. Celeste, you belong wherever you want to be. I don't care where you came from. I care about you." Celeste's eyes softened, but there was still doubt in her expression. "But what if it doesn't work? What if she's right, and this is all just some fantasy?" Austin reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "It's not a fantasy, Celeste. This is real. You and me. We can make this work. I believe that." For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of everything between them hanging in the air. Finally, Celeste nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay. Let's try." Austin smiled, relief flooding his chest. "Good." In the weeks that followed, Austin and Celeste began to navigate their new relationship, each step bringing them closer together, but also forcing them to confront the stark differences between their worlds. Celeste, who had spent so long surviving on the streets, found it difficult to adjust to Austin's world of wealth and privilege. She struggled with the judgmental stares of his friends, the whispered comments about her background, the assumptions that she was only with him for his money. But Austin stood by her, refusing to let anyone's opinions sway him. He saw the strength in her, the kindness that had drawn him to her in the first place. He didn't care about her past. He only cared about the future they could build together. One evening, they sat together on the balcony of Austin's apartment, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Celeste leaned back in her chair, sipping a glass of wine as she stared out at the skyline. "Sometimes I can't believe this is my life," she said quietly. "A few months ago, I was living on the streets, wondering if I'd ever have a future. And now, I'm here, with you." Austin reached over, gently taking her hand. "You deserve this, Celeste. You deserve everything." Celeste smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I don't know if I believe that yet, but I'm trying." Austin squeezed her hand, his voice soft. "You don't have to believe it right now. I'll believe it for both of us until you do." But just as they were beginning to find their footing, the world around them started to push back. The whispers grew louder, the judgment more palpable. Austin's friends, People he had known for years began to distance themselves, unwilling to accept Celeste into their circle. His colleagues raised eyebrows, subtly questioning his choices. Even his family, who had always been supportive, expressed concern. "You're making a mistake," his brother had said one evening over drinks. "She's not like us, Austin. You're setting yourself up for disappointment." Austin had bristled at the comment, but he couldn't shake the feeling that deep down, everyone believed Celeste wasn't good enough for him. And worse, he feared that Celeste might start to believe it too. One night, as they lay in bed, Celeste turned to him, her voice quiet in the darkness. "Austin, what if this doesn't work? What if everyone else is right?" Austin sat up, looking down at her. "They're not right, Celeste. They don't know you like I do." "But maybe they don't need to know me," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Maybe this was always going to end in heartbreak." Austin's heart ached at her words, but he refused to let her give up. "No, we can make this work. We just have to believe in us, not what anyone else thinks." Celeste nodded, though the doubt still lingered in her eyes. And so, they continued, fighting against the world around them, trying to build something real, despite the odds stacked against them. As the days stretched into weeks, Austin and Celeste continued to navigate the challenges that surrounded them, but it was clear that the path was anything but smooth. Every day felt like a test of their resilience, not just individually, but as a couple. Celeste, despite her best efforts, couldn't ignore the stares, the whispers, the subtle but cutting remarks from those in Austin's world. The comments would come disguised as casual conversation, but the intention was clear. "Isn't it refreshing how people from different walks of life can find each other?" one of Austin's business partners had said at a dinner party, his wife nodding knowingly. Another guest had laughed a little too loudly at that, adding, "Yes, it's like a modern fairy tale, isn't it? Rags to riches, right?" Celeste had smiled politely, gripping her fork a little tighter than necessary. Austin had squeezed her hand under the table, a silent reassurance that they were in this together. But even his support didn't erase the discomfort that settled in her stomach every time she was reminded of how out of place she felt in his world. And it wasn't just strangers who made it difficult. Austin's family, while polite, never quite embraced her. His mother would ask leading questions about Celeste's plans for the future, her tone just a bit too sweet, the subtext clear. "What are you bringing to the table?" "I'm sure you have ambitions," she'd say, sipping her wine. "But of course you must understand that our family has certain expectations." Celeste would smile and answer politely, but those conversations left her feeling drained, as though she was constantly fighting to prove her worth. Meanwhile, Austin struggled in his own way. His career demanded more of him than ever, and the pressure to maintain his image in the business world clashed with his desire to build a life with Celeste. His colleagues, the people he had spent years cultivating relationships with, were beginning to question his judgment. They didn't say it outright, but he could feel the shift in their behavior, the skepticism, the quiet disapproval. One afternoon, while Austin was in his office preparing for a crucial meeting, his older brother Andrew stopped by unannounced. "Got a minute?" Andrew asked, closing the door behind him without waiting for an answer. Austin sighed, already knowing what was coming. "What is it, Andrew?" Andrew didn't mince words. "Look, I know you don't want to hear this, but you're not doing yourself any favors with Celeste." Austin leaned back in his chair, trying to keep his temper in check. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know what I mean," Andrew said, his voice calm but firm. "You're jeopardizing everything you've built by dragging her into your life. People are talking, and it's not good." Austin's jaw tightened. "I don't care what people are saying. Maybe you should," Andrew countered. "This isn't about love or feelings, Austin. This is about your career, your reputation. The world you're in, our world, doesn't take kindly to outsiders, especially not ones like her." "Ones like her?" Austin echoed, his voice rising. "What the hell does that mean?" Andrew raised his hands in a placating gesture. I'm just being realistic. You think I don't see the way people treat her? It's not going to get better. You're fighting a losing battle, and you're going to end up losing more than you think. This isn't just about you. It's about the family, the business. You've worked too hard to let it all fall apart over some— Don't finish that sentence, Austin interrupted, his voice cold. Celeste is not a sum. She's the woman I care about. And if that bothers you or anyone else, that's too bad. Andrew sighed, shaking his head. You're being stubborn. Just think about what you're doing before it's too late. With that, he turned and walked out of the office, leaving Austin to simmer in silence. That night, as Austin sat in his apartment, nursing a glass of whiskey, his thoughts kept returning to his brother's words. As much as he hated to admit it, there was a part of him that couldn't dismiss Andrew's concerns. His career, his family's legacy, those things mattered. But did they matter more than the life he was trying to build with Celeste? He was still deep in thought when Celeste walked in, her face tired and drawn. She had been working at a local shelter, volunteering her time to help those in need, and while it was fulfilling work, it was emotionally exhausting. Rough day? Austin asked, standing up to greet her. Celeste nodded, kicking off her shoes and collapsing onto the couch. Yeah, you could say that. But it's good to feel useful. Austin sat beside her, draping an arm over her shoulders. For a few minutes, they sat in comfortable silence, but the weight of the conversation he needed to have hung between them. Finally, Celeste broke the silence. You look like you've got something on your mind. What is it? Austin hesitated. He didn't want to burden her with the doubts that had been gnawing at him, but he couldn't keep it inside any longer. It's my family, he said quietly. They're worried about us. Celeste turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. Worried how? Austin sighed, running a hand through his hair. They think I'm making a mistake, that we're too different, that it won't work. Celeste was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was calm but tinged with sadness. And what do you think? Austin didn't answer right away. He didn't know how to put into words the conflict raging inside him. I think they don't understand what we have. But I also know this is hard, on both of us. I don't want to lose you, Celeste, but I don't know how to make this easier. Celeste nodded slowly, her eyes distant. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. I knew I'd never really fit in with your world, but I didn't think it would be this hard. She stood up, walking to the window and looking out at the city below. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being selfish, if I'm holding you back from the life you're supposed to have. Austin's heart clenched. He hated that she felt this way, that the world had made her doubt herself. He walked over to her, gently turning her to face him. You're not holding me back, he said firmly. You're the best thing that's happened to me. I don't care about what my family thinks or what my colleagues say. All I care about is you. Celeste looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. But for how long? How long can you fight against them? How long before you start to resent me for it? Austin shook his head. Never. I'll never resent you. We'll figure this out. Together. Celeste sighed, leaning into him. I want to believe that. I really do. Austin wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Then believe it. Believe in us. But as much as they wanted to believe, the cracks in their relationship only deepened. The pressure from Austin's world weighed heavily on them both, and no matter how much they tried to ignore it, the doubts lingered. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Celeste turned to him, her expression pained. I've been thinking, she said softly. Maybe we need some space. Austin felt like the air had been knocked out of him. Space? What do you mean? Celeste sighed, her voice trembling. I mean that I think we're both struggling, and maybe some time apart will help us figure things out. I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to keep dragging you down." Austin's heart raced, panic setting in. "You're not dragging me down, Celeste. I don't want space. I want to be with you." "But look at us," Celeste said, her voice breaking. "We're both fighting battles on every side. Maybe we need to step back, take a breath, and figure out if this is really what we want." Austin shook his head, refusing to accept it. "I don't need time. I know what I want, and it's you." Celeste looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Austin, but I need to find myself. I need to know that I'm standing on my own 2 feet before I can stand beside you." Austin's heart shattered, but he knew she was right. As much as he wanted to fight it, he couldn't deny that they were both struggling. And maybe, just maybe, some time apart would help them find the clarity they needed. "Okay," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "If that's what you need, I'll give it to you." Celeste nodded, wiping her tears. "Thank you." The next morning, Celeste packed her things and left Austin's apartment. As the door closed behind her, Austin felt an emptiness settle in his chest, a void that he wasn't sure how to fill. He had thought they could overcome anything, but now he wasn't so sure. All he knew was that he loved her, and he could only hope that this wasn't the end. As the days passed, Austin threw himself into his work, trying to numb the pain of Celeste's absence. But no matter how busy he kept himself, the ache in his chest never went away. He missed her laugh, her strength, the way she saw the world. He had lost her, and he wasn't sure if he'd ever get her back. For Celeste, the time apart was both a blessing and a curse. She had wanted space to find herself, to rebuild her life, but without Austin by her side, everything felt harder. The streets were lonelier, the shelters colder. She missed the warmth of his presence, the way he made her feel like she was enough. But as much as she missed him, she knew she had made the right choice. She needed to stand on her own, to prove to herself that she was capable of living a life beyond survival. And so, she worked harder than ever, finding odd jobs and saving up enough money to rent a small, modest apartment. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and it was a step toward the independence she craved. Weeks turned into months, and though the pain of their separation never fully went away, both Austin and Celeste grew in their own ways. Austin learned to stand up to his family, refusing to let their opinions dictate his choices. He realized that the only life he wanted was one where he could be true to himself and to the people he loved. And Celeste, for the first time in years, began to believe in her own strength. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. She was building something, slowly but surely, and with each step she took, her confidence grew. But even as they walked their separate paths, the connection between them never faded. They still thought of each other, still missed each other, and in the quiet moments, when the world seemed too much to bear, they both wondered if they had made the right choice. It was a rainy evening when Austin found himself standing outside Celeste's apartment. He had driven there without really thinking, his heart pounding in his chest as he stood in the pouring rain. He hadn't seen her in months, hadn't spoken to her since the day she left. But he couldn't stay away any longer. He knocked on the door, his heart racing. A few moments later, the door opened, and there she was, Celeste, standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with surprise. "Austin?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. Austin stepped closer, his voice trembling. "I couldn't stay away anymore. I need you, Celeste. I always have." Celeste stared at him, her heart pounding. She had thought about this moment 100 times, had imagined what she would say if he ever came back. But now that he was here, all she could do was feel the flood of emotions rushing through her. "I've missed you," she finally whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I didn't think you'd come back." Austin reached out, gently taking her hand. "I never really left, Celeste. You're all I've thought about since the day you walked out that door. And I don't care what anyone says. I don't care about the world we're supposed to fit into. All I care about is you. Us." Celeste felt the weight of his words, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make it work. She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him, and as the rain poured down around them, Austin held her close, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As they stood there in the rain, holding on to each other, they knew that their story was far from over. There would be more battles to fight, more doubts to overcome, but they were ready. They had found their way back to each other, and this time, they wouldn't let the world tear them apart. Together, they would build something stronger, something real, and no matter what came their way, they would face it side by side, their hearts beating as one.